All right, guys, so we kind of left off with Johnson announcing he will not be running for a second term. We're going to look at kind of some of the impacts from the turning point when we talk about the Tet Offensive and how that shifts public opinion. So we kind of see two sides. We see the Hawks. Those are the group of people who support the war in Vietnam and the goal of containment. And then there's Doves. Okay, those are people who protested the war. Again, when we talk about a dove, usually they are used to represent peace. Hawks are more aggressive. That's an easy way that you can remember that. Okay, so when we look at the Vietnam War, especially the later years of the Vietnam War, there's a huge divide in kind of the support or anti kind of protest for the war. Okay, so we're going to look at some examples. So, what's the opposition? Why are people against going to the Vietnam War? Okay, when we talk about the Vietnam War, the draft is going to be used to send soldiers to the war. When we talk about the draft, we see a huge population of the soldiers who are being drafted were poor and were minorities. Okay, so there are some ways that you could get out of it. Again, kind of financial compensation. There was also opportunities that if you were in college, you had a 3.0 or higher, you could not be drafted. So we see a lot of the more affluent and wealthy people were able to do that, while poor people and minorities are not able to do that. We see racial problems. Again, we still see division in troops and fighting. And we also see major drug problems while soldiers were fighting in the war. Okay, another source of opposition, we didn't always see the war in Vietnam as kind of a true and honest thing. The My Lai massacre, okay, so remember we talked about the Viet Cong and there wasn't always a clear enemy. The My Lai massacre really came down hard on the United States. Soldiers went in on a mission to clear out Viet Cong from villages and basically targeted this village and ended up killing anywhere, again, the exact numbers aren't clear, between 200 and 500 unarmed villagers. Most of them, again, were elderly men, women, young children. All of them were going to be killed. Okay? Again, we accuse them of being Viet Cong, but it is not clear. It goes even further when we look at this gentleman down here. It goes even further because the government tries to kind of cover up exactly what happened here. It's a big scandal, takes many years to kind of blow it wide open. But again, when we see things like this with innocent children being killed, it makes us question again, what are we doing in Vietnam? And is it kind of pure and is it good like we intended? This is going to lead to a huge spark and increase in anti-war demonstrations and protests. So several different examples. So you see in Columbia University, these types of pictures, especially right here, are classic during this time period, where you see kind of the classic hippie or student of the time period lined up kind of versus these soldiers. We also see another way to protest, okay, is to dodge the draft. So obviously, looking at the geography of the United States in relation to North America, Canada or Mexico is going to be the prime candidates for fleeing the United States to dodge the draft. So lots of people kind of left. Over here you see a protest where they're burning their draft card. In 1977, we're going to go back and President Carter is going to grant amnesty because you could be prosecuted, you could go to jail. He's going to grant amnesty or forgiveness to those who did end up dodging the draft. Okay, other examples, okay, a huge protest breaks out right outside of the Democratic Convention in Chicago, talking about the next election, because obviously this war was going to be a huge topic during that election. You had famous celebrities constantly kind of building up morale for the soldiers. Jane Fonda was a very clear protester against the war. So again, many kind of called her a traitor. Okay, probably the most infamous one that you need to know is the Kent State University protest. This resulted in 4 students being shot by the National Guard and leaving 11 students wounded. So when we talk about these, these demonstrations escalate into violence and escalate into these deaths that are happening across campuses. Less than a week later, a similar event is going to happen in Jackson State University, leaving 2 dead and 12 wounded. Okay, so this is the famous picture from the Kent State University protest, leaving a dead student just kind of laying right in the middle of the sidewalk because the National Guard kind of fired into these fields and these campuses when students would not kind of disband from the protest. If you have ever seen the building along 10th Street in the front of ECU, the older looking building, if you notice the windows are kind of very narrow and small, that is because that building was built during this time period, and it is literally built to sustain an anti-war protest. So it's meant to prevent from things like Molotov cocktails, where you would light a bottle filled with alcohol on fire and throw it, kind of forming a makeshift bomb. It literally preventing that because it's built during this time period in the height of demonstrations, especially on college campuses. Another large group, okay, is kind of this counterculture movement. So remember, these were the people who were kind of the beatniks in the 50s. We see the counterculture group is going to be the hippies. So again, they're going against the social norms. Kind of the center of this hippie movement is going to be in Haight-Ashbury in California. Okay, so think about like the San Francisco area. And one of their key platforms, they're going to protest the war in Vietnam. Peace, not love, free love, all of that kind of fun stuff. So they are going to be a large group that protests and is against the war. Okay, and then we're going to reach like the final straw against support for the United States is the Pentagon Papers. Okay, so we have Daniel Ellsberg, who worked as a defense analyst. And what he does is he takes government documents and he's going to leak them based on the war efforts. And he's going to release these to New York Times. Okay, so New York Times wants to publish them. The government, so again, we've gone through another president. The government wants to stop or censor this from being released to the public. Okay, this kind of goes back and it shows we weren't really 100% truthful in what we were doing in Vietnam, or when we said that we win Vietnam. Okay, so again, what was in the documents, overall the government kind of being more aware of the misdeeds of the soldiers in Vietnam. It talks about how we weren't really fighting for a specific goal, but now at this point we just didn't want to lose and we didn't want to embarrass ourselves. So again, this would be really damaging to the U.S. government if it got out. So this is going to lead to the Supreme Court case, New York Times versus the United States. The Supreme Court is actually going to rule in favor of the New York Times. Okay, it is protected by the First Amendment with freedom of the press. Okay, we cannot withhold that information from the public. Okay, so we'll kind of stop here today, but kind of lasting impact. So again, people were already protesting the war, and now we are just done. We see there are no clear goals set by the government. We are unhappy with what we are doing, and we realize we're fighting a losing battle at this point.